This is the news on top of the hour.
Live from our studio in Georgetown.
Kaieteur Radio, 99.1 FM.
It is Sunday, November 15th, 2022, and it is 10 hours 1 in Guyana and right across the Eastern Caribbean. Good morning and welcome to your morning newscast for today, Sunday, November 13th, 2022. With the news at this time, my name is Joshua Van Slykeman. Good morning and thank you for joining us. Let's get to the news in details. President Irfan Ali has said that multinational oil conglomerate ExxonMobil will not be subjected to the new terms announced for future oil blocks amid calls from the political opposition and members of civil society for the administration to move into this direction. Given the changed circumstances in the Stabroek block, he maintained that the PPP will respect the quote-unquote sanctity of contract and stay true to its manifesto promise of change in future contracts. Meanwhile, as it regards windfall taxes, the president said it must be understood that Ghana is a newcomer to the oil and gas sector, and many countries that are implementing this tax system have been producing oil for decades. The term windfall simply refers to the excess profits being made by the oil companies operating in Guyana, and as a result of the higher oil prices being earned due to the Russia-Ukraine war, globally, countries are moving to tax the additional profits being made on their resources. Ali also said that in Guyana's case, the country has an agreement which must be honored. In other news, insisting that local businesses in Guyana over the years have been the driving factor in the country's economy, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce and Industry believes now it is a time for the taxation policy to be reviewed so that small companies can enjoy benefits similar to that of ExxonMobil. This was noted by President of the private sector body Timothy Tucker. Cognizant of the fact that last year over $266 billion in taxes were waived by the Guyana Revenue Authority, with $203 billion to oil companies. The chamber president called for these tax incentives to be introduced for local businesses to allow growth and even regional expansion. He explained that while he believes frontier companies like ExxonMobil should be privy to tax exemptions, given that they made investments in a very uncertain environment, government must find a way to level the playing field. You're listening to your main newscast on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM for today, Sunday, November 13th. In other news, in order for the government to maximize the collection of revenue from offshore projects as well as avoid the slaughter of profits by oil companies, it must seek to have a clear definition of the types of costs or expenses oil companies can recover. This is according to a key report by the International Monetary Fund. The financial institution was keen to know that it would be in the country's best interest to outline in clear terms what are the eligible costs that can be recovered on the production sharing agreements. The IMF said too that it would also serve the country well to have regular control of costs through audits. The fund said it is for GRA and the Ministry of Finance to work together on the aforementioned issue. The financial organization said too that this includes working together on the sharing of data of a fiscal nature, which are regularly submitted by the oil operator to the sector ministry, such as, but not limited to, the statements of costs to be incurred and cost recovery. This is Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. This is your main newscast. We will return after these messages. Welcome back. Thank you for joining us. We continue with your news. A untrained 22-year-old teacher working a part-time job at Teleperformance just to make ends meet and take care of her three disabled brothers lobbied President Mohammed Irfan Ali to waive some $345,000 in taxes she owes to the Guyana Revenue Authority. The teacher pleaded with the president to assist her in a letter she wrote to him on Thursday, November 20, 2022. Fearing that Ali might not get a chance to read the document, one of her colleagues decided to share it with Kaieteur. The woman said she was unaware that her taxes had to be recalculated because she was working two jobs, and though that she had not been paying the right amount. Since she started working, she claimed that prior to the call she received on Wednesday, GRA had never informed her that she owed taxes. In the letter, she explained her situation to the president and told him that she cannot afford the debt because her meager untrained teacher salary is barely enough to cancel the bills at her home and feed her family. In other news, the government of Guyana and the United Arab Emirates, UAE, have formalized an agreement on cybersecurity, the Department of Public Information announced on Saturday. Vice President Bara Jagdeo has traveled to the UAE for talks with senior government officials and investors. He is accompanied by ministers within the Ministry of Public Works, Deodat Indar, and National ITC Advisor Darrell Akong. Jagdeo met with Rahim Al, Minister of State for International Cooperation, where a number of issues were discussed, including strengthening the role and interests of the South in the global multilateral system and climate change negotiations. In all news, the Northwest Secondary School located in Mabaruma Region 1 will soon be rebuilt. The school was destroyed by fire in September of 2021. According to the Ministry of Education, it is seeking a contractor to rebuild the school. According to the ministry, bidding for the project will be conducted through the National Competitive Bidding Procedures. The estimated cost to reconstruct the building was not stated in the ad, but the project is slated to open on December 1, 2022 at the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board Office. 3 motion scales that were sourced and paid for full by the then Ministry of Public Infrastructure some 6 years ago are yet to be delivered to the ministry now named the Ministry of Public Works. Auditor General Deodat Sharma in his 2021 report said that the $72.264 million was paid for the supply and delivery of 3 motion scales. The supplier was required to deliver the scales within 90 days of the signing of the contract, as payment should have been 50% advance payment within 30 days of signing of the contract and the balance on delivery. However, as of December 31, 2016, the report stated that the full contract sum was paid to the supplier. At the time of reporting, the scales have not been supplied to the ministry, the AG explained. The AG said that the ministry reported that 2 of the scales were at the wharf, but experienced some delays in clearing the scales. Moreover, there are issues with the payment of value-added tax. And just before we wrap things up right here on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM, we turn your attention to the page 7 of the Kaieteur News that is dedicated of being blunt. Who said government dumb? Guyanese governments are smart. They sign drug contracts and leave out penalty clauses. That means nobody has to worry about anything, including failure. No performance, no problem. Honestly, a problem. Don't worry about penalty. All those left out, all man Jack hitting the jackpot. Who said the government has no sense? And with that, we've come to the end of your main newscast right here on Kaieteur Radio 99.1 and 99.5 FM. Allow me to remind you that you can get the full details of these stories and much more by picking up a copy of the Kaieteur News at the newsstand near you, or head across to our website at kaieteurnewsonline.com. I am Joshua Van Sleckman. Thank you for joining us. Coming up after the break, my colleague Kevin Smith joins you with a recap of all the top stories we would have carried over the past week. Stay with us.
Kaieteur Radio, keeping you informed.
Demerara and Essequibo 99.1 FM.
Burby's 99.5 FM. Kaieteur Radio.
Good morning. Welcome to the Weekend Review on Kaieteur Radio. I'm Kevin Smith. We're about to give you a rundown of all the top stories carried in the past week. Let's begin as usual with our oil and gas segment. The AFC has not given the new production sharing agreement a passing grade just yet, based on the preliminary provisions announced by Vice President Bara Jagdeo. The political party believes that the entire deal must be scrutinized in depth before Guyanese laud the contract as a better deal compared to the 2016 ExxonMobil contract. And as ExxonMobil continues to reap exponential profits from Guyana's lucrative Stabroek Block and the lopsided contract it signed with the government in 2016, stakeholders are beginning to challenge the terms the country got and are demanding more wealth from all future projects to be approved by the government. Opposition leader Aubrey Norton said all the additional projects Exxon wants to pursue in the Stabroek Block must adhere to the new terms announced by the government to rake in more wealth for the country. And ExxonMobil and Shell are selling their California wells, and officials are worried that the reason behind their departures is the looming liability for environmental cleanup, which can be left on taxpayers to foot the bill. Decommissioning is the process of ending offshore oil and gas operations as an offshore platform and returning the ocean and seafloor to their pre-lease condition. Greg Rogers, an attorney and accountant who researches the oil and gas industry, said the deal allows the sellers to shed decommissioning costs. We also reported that GRA appears to be struggling with efforts to find critical specialists to boost its capacity to monitor the country's booming oil and gas sector. GRA said its Petroleum Revenue Department had a staff complement of 31 officers as of August 2022. In 2021, it said 4 staff were recruited, while 4 staff had since resigned from the department. The authority said it has 36 vacancies to fill for the department. And the prolific Stabroek Block has more than 11 billion barrels of oil and is linked to a lopsided PSA that the PPP administration has refused to change. Instead, the government said that all future deals will secure more benefits for the country. Transparency activist Dr. Yog Mahadio said the government must not be allowed to throw away the wealth in the Stabroek Block in hopes that more oil would be discovered in the smaller oil blocks that are soon to be auctioned. He reminded that the PPPC in its 2020 manifesto had promised to renegotiate the existing contract rather than seek more on future deals. And coming from Bloomberg, the Czech Republic imposed its first windfall tax, a 60% tax surcharge, on some of the biggest businesses to help finance energy subsidies without boosting government borrowing. The bill is a key part of the center-right government strategy to ease the impact of the worst cost of living crisis in 3 decades while trying to wean the country off record pandemic-era budget deficits. And I'll tell you, ExxonMobil Guyana country manager Alistair Routledge on Tuesday sang praises of the PPP government while referencing the Wales gas-to-energy agreement which was reached earlier this year. It must be noted that the PPP government is pursuing the gas-to-energy project in the absence of updated feasibility studies, even though the cost of the venture has increased by hundreds of millions of US dollars. The APNU-AFC said plans to reduce electricity costs involve the use of renewable energy, as this has been proven to be the cheaper and safer method. Meanwhile, President Ali announced that the government approved a contract to a foreign joint venture that bid $900 million to construct 300 megawatts power plant and natural gas liquids facility at Wales. The engineering, procurement, construction will be supervised by a global supervision firm. President Ali said the selected firm is Engineers India Limited. And moving on, Chairman of the Private Sector Commission, Paul Chiang, called on the local content secretariat to expand the area set aside for Guyanese to benefit from the oil and gas sector. Chiang said that with Guyana ranking among the fastest growing economies in the world, opportunities for Guyanese exist but require carefully drafted plans to improve capacity and skill sets to tap into these offers. ExxonMobil and Dutch shipbuilder SBM Offshore have signed a memorandum of understanding for another floating production, storage and offloading vessel to serve a future project in Guyana. Over the years, SBM secured several contracts for the provision of FPSO vessels to ExxonMobil, including the Liza Destiny and Liza Unity, which are already operating in Guyana and producing over 360,000 barrels of oil per day. And GRA at the end of the fiscal year 2021 granted a total of $266.7 billion in tax waivers, with a whopping $203.8 billion alone to the oil and gas sector, or 78.3% of all tax exemptions granted for the year. This is noted in the Auditor General's latest audit report. Notably, the tax waivers also amount to more than what the country gained in revenue from the oil sector during the same period. And coming from oilprice.com, a swath of high-quality oil discoveries by an ExxonMobil-led consortium offshore Guyana, which has identified at least 11 billion barrels of recoverable oil resources, has catapulted the impoverished South American country firmly onto the global oil map. The ExxonMobil-led consortium secured extremely favorable terms from Georgetown for the development of the Stabroek Block, with some analysts describing it as one of the most advantageous production sharing agreements ever obtained. And moving on, the $9 billion audit of oil giant ExxonMobil's expenses between 2018 and 2020 will now be ready by next month. According to President Irfan Ali, the head of state at the sidelines of an event on Friday was asked to give an update on the audit, since the process should have concluded since September. And now we move on to the politics, finance and infrastructure. The Caribbean Development Bank continues to work with countries in the region to build resilience, recognizing the impact of climate change in all aspects of economies. So said Mr. Ian Durant, the bank's director of economics. Building resilience also involves advanced budgeting and planning, the director indicated, adding that disaster risk management strategies in the economic domain must be developed and can include natural disaster and pandemic escape clauses in financing instruments. An audit into the management of healthcare waste at 5 main hospitals conducted between January 2017 and July 2019 found lax measures to store and dispose of the waste properly. The 5 health institutions that the audit examined were West Demerara Regional Hospital, Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, Diamond Diagnostic Center, New Amsterdam Regional Hospital, and Linden Hospital Complex. According to the audit findings, at these main health institutions, sharp containers with infectious waste were everywhere, and that inadequate storage space and poor storage practices resulted in large amounts of sharps containers and boxes stored haphazardly at these hospitals. It also found that waste was being dumped on the floor after treatment. Meanwhile, Guyana and the European Union signed a Forest Partnership Memorandum of Understanding on the sidelines of COP27 in Egypt, which will see this country receiving a grant of 5 million euros. Days after it was reported that Alaria Gold Corp boasted of a gold fever in Guyana, a local miner, Henry Alfonso, refuted claims made by the company that it owns the 9,000-acre Peruni gold field in Region 7. A performance audit of the Ministry of Health conducted by the Auditor General's Office determined that between 2015 and 2018, the Ministry of Health entered into $12.1 billion contractual agreement with local and international contractors and/or suppliers that contained no performance criteria or penalty clauses. This represents a blatant disregard for the Procurement Act of 2003, which requires that suppliers or contractors whose tenders have been accepted sign written contracts that conforms to all tender regulations. And moving on, Canada ordered 3 Chinese companies on Wednesday to divest their investments in Canadian critical minerals, citing national security. China, in response, accused Ottawa of using national security as a pretext and said the divestment order broke international commerce and market rules. We also reported that the Auditor General Deodat Sharma, in his 2021 report, highlighted that the APNU-AFC government had taken a $4 million loan from the Indian Exim Bank and purchased a number of drainage pumps that are incapable of doing the job Guyana requires. The report also highlighted that the Regional Democratic Council of Region 9 had awarded 8 contracts to a local contractor who is currently blacklisted up to the year 2030 by the Public Procurement Commission of Guyana. The contractor, we were told, is Vivekanand Dalip Enterprise. Additionally, the report noted that Demerara Harbour Bridge Corporation, which falls under the Ministry of Public Works, failed to refund $446 million to the Consolidated Fund in keeping with Section 43 of the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act of 2003, which stipulates that all unspent balances must be returned to the government coffers at the end of the fiscal year. And now let's tell you the Ministry of Home Affairs is still to recover $104,201 million in the overpayment of salaries and related deductions of $95,256 million for 2020, according to the 2021 Audit Office of Guyana report. During the opening of tenders on Wednesday, it was revealed that a total of 32 contractors are interested in upgrading the 13 hinterland bridges between Mabura and Curupakari. The construction of the bridges is a project being undertaken by the Ministry of Public Works, and according to the ministry's engineer, the projects are estimated to cost Guyana $2.2 billion. And moving on, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce on Friday expressed its dissatisfaction with the challenges local entrepreneurs face in accessing finance to expand their businesses to cater to the needs of the oil and gas sector. President Ali committed to establishing a team to aid businesses in crafting their commerce plans and feasibility studies to present to the local banks for approval. And that's the news of the moment. Remember, to get the full details of these stories, pick up a copy of the Kaieteur News. And don't forget, you can catch us on the MyTuner app as well as the Radio Garden app. You can also keep up to date by liking our Facebook page at Kaieteur Radio and subscribing to our YouTube channel, Kaieteur Radio Livestream. Oh,